Welcome. We're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Steve Buser. I'll be telling you a little bit more about myself in just a moment. We're delighted to have quite a few people attending, it looks like. We're well over 70, and that number is climbing as people join in. This will be available in an archived recorded version, so people can join us for that as well. This is a 60 to 90 minute webinar, interactive. We'd like people to ask questions, both audio and in writing, whichever you prefer with that. We'll cover that in just a little bit. And the topic of today is a clear and present danger, narcissism in the era of Donald Trump. And of course, that's today's seminar. It's also a book, this being the book. Many of you know about it. We're going to be really lecturing right from this book, meaning that a few of the key concepts we'll be covering. Not that we have time to do all the concepts, but we'll do as much of that as we can in the time permitted. And we definitely want to have a fair amount of discussion back and forth as well about it. This is such a powerful topic. I suspect there'll be a fair amount of interest in talking more about it. This is our disclaimer. I won't read the whole thing, but basically it's very important to know that we are not diagnosing any public figure with any mental illness. That would not be ethical to do so. We will be talking about criterion, we'll be talking about statements that candidates have made, but we will not be diagnosing anyone along those lines. Any statements today are pure opinion and should not be construed as diagnoses by either myself, any participant, or any organization represented today. The other disclaimer is, as usual, many of you know that we have these talks with some regularity, but we will be recording today's talk. That's so others can watch it at a later point. But that does mean if you would like to be anonymous, you need to take a couple precautions. If you send us a question through the question feature, typing it out into your computer, it will show your name that you registered under. If you don't want that name read, just say anonymous, or please keep my question anonymous, and we will endeavor to do so. If you want to be anonymous, do not press the raise your hand button, which will alert me that you'd like your microphone open if there's an opportunity, because if your microphone is open, you will not be anonymous. I cannot open your microphone. I can only invite you to open it, in which case then you can open the microphone if we come to that point. And one other piece is that this is our second webinar on politics and Jungian psychology. We're doing 3. This is a series. This is the second one. The first one happened a few weeks ago. It was moderated by a number of different presenters. Pithia Pei did the moderation herself with that. This second one is just a discussion with me and the webinar online. We will have a third, more intense one, 3 hours in duration, on October 19th. We're going to have 4, maybe 5 live sites included: San Francisco, Asheville, Zurich, and England. I think northern England, or maybe London. I'm not sure where he'll be presenting from, but that will be Warren Coleman from England, Tom Singer from San Francisco, Murray Stein, I didn't type his last name, I apologize, I misspelled some things there, and Betty Sue Flowers will be hopefully joining us. We haven't confirmed that yet, but it'll be a very lively discussion, I think. All 3 are at no cost. We're really trying to get these seminars as widely available, really to raise awareness of the nature of what's going on right now in our political system. The book we'll be talking about is A Clear and Present Danger, Narcissism in the Era of Donald Trump. This was a very quickly, but hopefully well put together book. The concept of this book came to us 3.5 months prior to release. And if any of you have written or edited a book, you know that is almost unheard of. Most books take minimum 18 months, often 2 or 3 years. But all the authors, 18 authors in total, who contributed to this, really saw the need of getting this book out as soon as possible during the then primary election cycle here in the United States, and then now, of course, with the general election coming upon us. We sent out requests to 18 authors. We asked them to give us their manuscripts of their chapters back in a month, and virtually every person requested did so. So it tells you the energy behind this book. We're very proud of the contributors to the book. I will quickly read their names off. Many of these people you've known. Some are best-selling authors, have sold books in the millions. Others are well-known Jungian psychologists or analysts, and some are university professors. They include Jean Shinoda Bolin, myself, Steve Buser, Leonard Cruz, Clarissa Pincola Estes, Nancy Swift-Ferlate, James Hollis, Alden Josie, Thomas Patrick Lavin, Catherine Madden, Eve Merrim, John McLean, Robert Moore, Lawrence DeRosen, Susan Rowland, Nathan Schwartz-Salant, Thomas Singer, Jacqueline West, and James Wiley. So really some top-notch individuals contribute to this book, which we're so pleased with. It's gotten quite a bit of public attention, and this slide is out of date. There's 3 or 4 more I need to add to that, radio stations and interviews that have occurred. But the New York Times, you mentioned the book, Bill Moyers did a piece on one of the chapters, and a number of other folks as well. We're hoping to spread the word. So one thing we're asking is that if anybody feels this topic is important enough to share, you have any connections with media or people of influence in the public realm, we really urge you to circulate this. And the website has a press kit that you can download, and we'll talk about that more later. So a little bit about myself. I realized that even though I've hosted the Asheville Jung Center and Chiron publication events, it's very rare for me to present. Usually I introduce the main presenter, often Marie Stein, and will then be more in the background reading questions or engaging. I've presented once or twice, but this is the probably the 3rd time I've done a major presentation just for me. So you need to know a little bit about me. I went to undergraduate at Michigan State University, went to medical school at Duke, did a pediatric internship in the military at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, then did a psychiatry residency at the same location, served 12 years in the U.S. Air Force with a concluding rank of major, and co-founded the Asheville Jung Center in 2008, became the publisher at Chiron Publications 2013, and I've been in private practice in clinical psychiatry since 1997 here in Asheville. I've been doing psychiatry since '89. And I'm a clinical person. I see patients day in and day out, 7 to 8 hours a day. That's my primary job, but we also do some books and seminars. This is our other book. I've written 2 books, co-written, 2 books. This was the first, called DSM-5, Insanely Simplified. The reason I bring this up is because one of the pieces we're looking at are the diagnostic criterion of narcissistic personality disorder. And it's important to know that we wrote the book on it. Not literally, we wrote a book that talks about it and other pieces, but we do have some expertise in psychiatric diagnosis and looking in depth into the diagnostic criterion. And this book looks at a spectrum approach of how to look at psychiatry without a black and white approach, but looks at the spectrum of we're all somewhere on the spectrum, and it goes into more detail with that. So we are going to do our first poll question. I've integrated 4, I believe, questions for you today, and I will load the first one in just a moment. Let's launch that. So I think my screen just went blank, and there's a poll in front of you. So what I'd like you to do is take a minute or 2 and click through who you would lean towards right now. If you want to not tell me, that's fine. I don't know who you are. This is an anonymous poll, so it will just click. If the election were held today, who would you vote for? While people are taking the poll, I would like you to play with your raise your hand button. Go in and click the button. Anybody who wants to just say hello to me. We're not going to go into any detail, but I'm just going to open up a microphone or 2 and see if that system works. So anybody that's bored and would like to raise their hand, I'm going to open up a few of the microphones. If your hand button is raised, I am clicking your microphone, and you can overtalk each other. Just say hi to me, where you're at.
Hi, Steve. This is Lynn Barrett at Naval Hospital.
Excellent.
Hi, Steve. Hi, Steve. Mike here from Portland.
Excellent. Hello. Just See you.
Hi, Steve. This is Marguerite Kirsch.
Excellent, Marguerite. Fabulous. So
Good morning, Steve. This is Scary from Omaha.
Good morning. Or good afternoon. I guess Omaha is morning still. Okay. So.
Hello. Hello, Steve. It's Christine Canitas from Toronto.
Hello. Good to hear you as well. Excellent. Anybody else want to say hi? We'll close this part down in just a moment.
Yeah, this is Dick Purdy, Asheville.
Excellent. Hello.
And Kim Bateman from North Lake Tahoe.
Kim Bateman, I know you. You're one of our authors as well. She has. Let me see if I can grab your book. Was Across. Can't quite get to it, but she has written a wonderful book, Crossing the Owl's Bridge. We love your contribution to really end-of-life sorts of issues and grieving process. Okay, I'm going to close the microphones. I can press one button, and it closes all the microphones, I believe. The neat thing that we just experimented with is I had a dozen or more microphones open, and all of them closed simultaneous. I'm sorry, and none of them gave us audio feedback, which is nice. They've really improved the system quite a bit on the webinar, and we've been able to move. Actually, some of them are still open. I better mute these manually. But no audio feedback. So when we break for questions, please raise your hand, just like you did, if you'd like to speak, and we will open up some microphones with that, because I really do want this to be interactive as much as possible with that. Okay, so I'm going to close. I'm going to lower everybody's hand. There, we'll mute all again. Okay, so hands are lowered. You can raise them later on, and we will take breaks for questions. And I want to do it mostly audio questions, although we can do some written too, if people prefer with that. All right, I'm going to close the poll. The poll is now closed. And let's see if I can remember how to share the results of that. Can people see? Oh, here we go, share. I'm going to hit the share button. Okay, so if I did this right, people can now see the results of the poll. What I'm seeing is 3% Donald Trump, 88% Hillary Clinton, 5% Joel Stein, 1% Gary Johnson, 4% undecided or none of your business, or not voting. Okay, well that helps me a lot. So clearly people watching this video webinar are pro-Clinton, it would look like. That would make sense because our book certainly is suggesting that it's analyzing Donald Trump. Of course, we're not really doing that, but we are looking at narcissistic personality disorder along those lines. But thank you very much for both opening some microphones, for saying hello, and for voting and giving us a sense of what you're thinking. So I want to first just give you a brief overview of what we'll be talking about today. And there's really just 3 sections I want to get through. I'm doing that so that we have plenty of time for questions afterwards or in between each section, if at all possible. The 3 things I'd like us to look at today, all from the book. Each one of these are chapters within the book, in essence, or sections of the book. And these include, whoops, I got the wrong, I'm going the wrong way on that. Hold on one second. The areas, my webcam's doing funny things. Okay, let me just do that. That we're looking at are what is narcissistic personality disorder. So I want to spend some time on what is it. Some of that is just the plain old DSM-5, which is the 5th edition diagnostic criterion within psychiatry. But then also, why the controversy? What are the controversial pieces really about Trump and his temperament? So we'll spend a section on that. After that, I'd like to look at presidential narcissism. What is healthy presidential narcissism and what is unhealthy presidential narcissism? That's a chapter by Nathan Schwartz-Salant looking at. After that, we want to look at the psychology behind what we're calling the Trump phenomenon of why has Trump been so wildly successful up to now. And we have 2 aspects. One is something I've called the Trump complex that is possessing the United States in our mind. The other piece is what are the core messages coming out from the Trump campaign and why are they so successful at tapping into some of the hidden thoughts and fears that are going through the electorate. So that's the overview. That's what we'll be looking at in a broad context. This is the official DSM-5 diagnostic categories of F60.81, narcissistic personality disorder. The F60.81 will be very familiar to those of you who are therapists. If you're submitting insurance and hoping to get paid, you know that you need a ICD-10 diagnostic code, and that's the diagnostic code for narcissistic personality. It's not the ICD-9 code, which all of us use for the last 20-plus years, but just a couple years ago they changed it to the DSM-5 and ICD-10. That doesn't matter, but that's just the background of the diagnostic criterion. This is my slide that makes it a whole lot simpler. The last slide was kind of jargony. This one still has a fair amount of jargon. It gives you a very simple tic-tac-toe board, and if you hit 5 out of the 9 in an ongoing durable personality structure, then there's the possibility of diagnosing somebody with narcissistic personality disorder. So that if you look at this slide, I've just picked randomly 5 dots, tried to make it look like the Purina dog chow symbol. But that's just to say they need 5 of the 9. It could be any of 5, doesn't have to be those 5. But as long as 5 of the criterion are met, then you hit the criterion. So they are grandiosity, need for admiration, lack of empathy, feeling entitled, envious, that could be envious of others, or feeling that others are envious of you, tendencies to exploit others, seeing yourself as special, having fantasies of unlimited success and power, and overall an appearance of arrogance. Again, I could spend a lot of time going into each one of those, but I think most of us have a sense of what that means. And again, we're not really here to diagnose anybody, but really look at the controversy of why some are saying certain candidates might have a narcissism piece. We have a chapter in our book where we take 10 of the more bizarre or unusual statements from Donald Trump. We had some difficulty limiting it to 10, but I've included some of those in the next slides, and I'll just read quickly over just 5 or 6 of them if I remember right. One is, I get along with everybody. People love me, and you know what? I've been very successful. Everybody loves me. Interview with Anderson Cooper, 2016. All of the women on The Apprentice flirted with me, consciously or unconsciously. That's to be expected. Meaning, even if they didn't openly say they were flirting, that they unconsciously were flirting. At least I'm assuming that's what he means by that. The greatest builder is me, and I would build the greatest wall you have ever seen. Assuming that includes the builders of the pyramids and the Great Sphinx, but he overshadows even those builders, at least by self-declaration. In response to a Spy magazine go-to qualifier of Trump, I didn't read that right. Anyway, in response to Spy magazine calling Trump short-fingered, vulgarian, Trump told on page 6, my fingers are long and beautiful, as it has been well documented are various other parts of my body. That's left to the reader's imagination what he meant by that, but most people had a very clear idea what he meant by that. If I were a liberal Democrat, people would say, I'm the super genius of all time. The super genius of all time. If you're a conservative Republican, you've got to fight for your life. It's really an amazing thing. Donald Trump, August 2015, Meet the Press. I would build a great wall, and nobody builds walls better than me. I guess that includes China and that Great Wall in China. Believe me, and I'll build them very inexpensively. I will build a great, great wall on our southern border, and I will have Mexico pay for that wall. I think apologizing is a great thing, but you have to be wrong. I will absolutely apologize sometime in the hopefully distant future if I'm ever wrong. Donald Trump, September 2015, on The Tonight Show. So, the question then is, if we look at these 5 of 9 traits, which we already read, do people believe that Mr. Trump has narcissistic personality disorder? I'm sorry, my Skype thing is popping up. I'm not sure how I can block that, and I'll just click out of it when it does. So we're going to open poll number 2, if I can get this going. Poll number 2 is, does Donald Trump have narcissistic personality disorder? So I have launched that poll. The options are yes, no, and unsure. And this one I won't open up the microphones, although down the road fairly soon I want to do that. So get your questions ready if you'd like to. 60% of 135 people have voted, and I'll just wait until that goes a tad higher, and then we will close the poll. Looks like most people have voted. We're up to 72% votes. 75, going once, going twice, and closed, and share. So the results should be on your screen. 94% say yes, 0% say no, and 6% say unsure. Of course, we have to disclose that we clearly have a biased audience in that, most are Hillary Clinton supporters. Nonetheless, that's a very powerful trend with that. So, and I think if I hide that, I get back to my slides. Hopefully my slides are being shown before. I'm not positive they were. Anyway, so then the question, the official answer is actually no, or we're unsure. Oops, with that. Technically, we cannot formally diagnose Mr. Trump with narcissistic personality disorder, at least not as a psychiatrist. Am I able to do so? There's something called the Goldwater rule, which we might talk about later if you have time, although there's a chapter completely on that within the book. The reason the Goldwater rule is there is what the APA, the American Psychiatric Association, says, that since none of us have examined him and he has not signed a medical release of information, we cannot ethically diagnose him as such. I think there's a significant validity to that. We can certainly talk about concerns people have about narcissism, but as a psychiatrist, I am not able to formally diagnose him as such. I think that's not a bad thing per se. The other thing to remember is that all these criterion, or virtually all of them, are internal criterion, meaning that grandiosity, the need for admiration, really all of these, except exploiting of others and appearing arrogant, that's an external characteristic I can observe. But the others are internal, meaning Mr. Trump would have to undergo an evaluation and let us know his thought process. What's he thinking about that? How does he feel about it? Because we're making assumptions from the outside, which aren't completely fair to make, although some would argue that there's a reasonable validity with that. So that's one piece. And that's a clear controversy of should psychiatrists and psychologists and therapists of all sorts be muzzled in our ability to talk or even diagnose somebody in the public eye, or should we be free to discuss whether we believe somebody has that. Right now, the official answer is we're not supposed to. So in our book, Clear and Present Danger, Narcissism in the Era of Donald Trump, we are very careful to lay out the criterion of narcissistic personality disorder, review the evidence of how he portrays himself, but really we leave the opinion to the reader. So as you read the book, if it's your opinion that he does have it, you're entitled to that opinion. But ultimately, of course, it's the voter's opinion on November 8th. If the voter believes that there's a strong likelihood, then that should, you would presume, affect their vote. Is there enough concern of narcissism to be hesitant voting for him? That's a personal belief. And another way to state it, maybe a little bit stronger, it might be fair or not, but is Donald Trump's temperament a clear and present danger? Of course, lifting that title from her book, but a clear and present danger should he win the presidency. Would his apparent hot-headedness, seemingly retaliative nature, as well as other personality characteristics put the United States in danger with the Donald Trump as commander-in-chief? Again, that's a opinion that somebody has or doesn't have, and that's a good question for the voters to have on November 8th. So I'm going to put up this slide while I open the floor to questions. So what I'd like to do is have people raise your hands. You've already done that a bit already. Push the raise your hand button. I'll glance through some of the written questions if we have time. But go ahead and push the raise your hand button, and I will open up a microphone or two once I get that up there. And I'm not seeing any raise your hand yet, unless I'm misreading that. Oh, we do have some. There they are. There's two. So I'm going to open up, I need my glasses because I'm getting old. Lisa, I'm going to open up your microphone, so yours first. Lisa, can you hear me? You'll have to click your unmute. Richard, I'm going to unmute yours too. And
Can you hear me now?
yes, we can indeed. So Lisa,
Hi.
go ahead. Question or thought?
Hi. Hi, this is Lisa from Seattle. I'm a Jungian psychotherapist here. I just want to let you know that your slides are not displaying, at least on my GoToWebinar app.
Oh, yuck. Are they displaying now, or are they?
No, I just have seen you. The diagnostic criteria did not display that I saw. I'm on GoToWebinar, and
Okay,
the voting slides have displayed, but not your other slides.
Okay, hold on a second. Did they display in the very beginning?
Yes, when you first came on.
Okay. Are you seeing the vote display now?
I do see the vote displays, but when you had your bullet points with the
Okay.
diagnostic criteria,
Gotcha.
I think that you had a slide, and those did not display.
Indeed. How about now? I just hit the hide button. Is it showing now or still nothing?
Do not see it.
You're not seeing it? Okay.
Maybe you might want to get feedback from others, but that's
Yeah.
what my phone is
I've got
showing.
3 microphones open. I'm not going to open any further microphones, but Joy, Lisa, Richard, your microphones are open. Everybody else, click the raise your hand button if you don't see slides. So correct the, I'm seeing a few hands go up. And the ones with open microphones, are you guys seeing slides?
Yes.
You are?
Yes, I
Okay.
can see it.
So Richard, you see them. Joy, do you see the slides?
I do. Yes, I do.
Okay. So the ones that aren't, you might be on a device that doesn't do it. Are you on a phone or an iPad or?
I'm on an iPhone.
An iPhone. The phones might not. I think I've seen that from some folks that certain platforms GoToWebinar will display the slide and some don't. So if anybody is on a computer and not seeing the slides, go ahead and send a question to us. If you're on a smartphone, you might not see the slides. I apologize for that. We should have sent out probably a warning about that.
Hey, Steve, that is correct. You can see the slides and the video while you're on a phone. You can only see one or the other, I believe.
Can they toggle back and forth, Brian? Can they go back and forth, or are they limited to just video? Do you know?
I think there is an option to go back and forth. I'm
Okay.
not sure because I'm not.
So smartphones, either just me, lucky you, sorry about that, or there might be a button. Look around for a button. Sometimes there's a arrow with 2 ends on it that if you flip, you can switch, back and forth. And anybody else on an open microphone? Are the slides okay? I think you said they were, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But thank you for giving us that technical piece. That's very important for me to know. Richard or Joy, your microphones are open. Any thoughts or comments?
Yeah, it's a comment. It's true that while we cannot diagnose without seeing someone, what we diagnose from is what they say and the body language that they give when they're saying it. And given that, it would seem to me that that would be an appropriate diagnosis for him.
A lot of people share that.
Enough of it that we know.
Yeah, and that's that whole comment. The other piece that gets under my skin is you can be a talking head on a news show and diagnose them all you want and talk about it all you want, but if you have an advanced degree in mental health, you're muzzled from being able to diagnose them. And how does that make any sense? But yet I still understand the APA's piece. For me personally, I'm going right up the line, not crossing it, but yeah, I'm giving the information that I see with that. But thank you very much. I agree with much of what you said. Joy, I think your microphone's open. Do you have a thought or comment?
I do, and I understand the focus on diagnosis, but as a clinician, I work in New York City and in Poughkeepsie, and I'm concerned about what's happening in this country. So how it reflects, how his attitudes, what he says, reflects what's going on in this country. So my 2 comments would be, it's pretty scary that a lot of people are interested in voting for him, even though there's a lot of irrationality and racism and attitudes against women and minorities. That's about our country. And my second thought is, how do we help Hillary speak more in action language? I think that's one of the things he does. He has action verbs. You know, lock her up, kill her. I mean, how do we help sort of more rational people think through about our future of our country? So those are my two comments.
Absolutely. Do you have an answer for your question? It's a marvelous question. Do you have any thoughts of how we help Hillary Clinton to do so?
Well, I have a son who's was involved with some marketing, and he had worked for DARPA for a while. And one of the things he says is that when they analyzed the online chatter, the language that many of the terrorists were using were action verbs, and that's something that she doesn't do very well. Like the one line she talked about when the moderator, the commander-in-chief conversation, asked her what she knew about ISIS. It took her a whole minute to get to the fact that, you know, well, we killed bin Laden, and we have to do the same thing with ISIS leaders. So that's Trump language. And
yeah, and my thought with that is, I've noticed that as well. Of when I talk to patients or friends or really anybody about Trump or Clinton, I really try not to proselytize if I can talk to you. Please don't hear me saying I'm trying to get people talking politics directly to patients, but we talk a lot about politics because there's so much fear. There's more fear in this election than I've ever seen any other election. So I have clients coming in terrified with what's going on right now.
Right.
What I notice is that many people seem to be drawn to Trump, and probably Clinton as well, from gut, from fear, from anxiety, from unconscious gut feeling motivations, and very literal from rational head pieces. I either hate Hillary because she's shrill and I don't like her voice and I don't like what she did before, or the emails, or I hate Trump for a long list of reasons. But rarely do I hear rational, these are the reasons. So I think Trump is very good at motivating the gut, the feeling, the emotions. And I agree completely with you that Clinton really needs to get better at speaking on that level instead of the head. Yes, the policies are important, and the 1,000 pages of policy that you posted is great. But if you can't speak from the gut and heart, where many people are voting from, unfortunately, it could not work so well. Let me open up. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I wonder if one of our responsibilities as mental health professionals is to help lay people think through how to think about what's happening in our country. So if you look at the neuroscience or someone like Stephen Porges's, polyvagal theory, when do you feel safe? When do you feel threatened? And why so many people feel threatened? And all the limbic system is popping, and rather than the frontal lobes being online. So how do we as professionals help people think through in a more rational way?
Exactly.
Best.
And there's a lot of that in the book. We'll be presenting another section shortly about that very piece of how some of the Trump campaign messages get to these really core fears and hidden thoughts. And that was one of the purposes of the book in that chapter, to try to raise awareness of how we're being played, or at least tapped into our fears, and that's how some candidates are getting votes and support from us. I'm going to open up the other phones, the other microphones, people with a hand raised. So hand is raised, your microphone's open. We'll see if that works or not with too many microphones open. And if any of you says hi, you can do the next question.
I have a comment, it's not a question. Can you hear me?
Yes, and what's your name?
Megan. I'm in Bozeman, Montana.
I see you on there. Okay, good. So go ahead, Megan.
I'm just conscious of the nationality piece and seeing the nation itself as narcissistic. So how do we expect, I'm curious about the question begging, what degree does any individual need to be narcissistic to exist in the world? There's that piece that is absolutely necessary.
Yes.
There's also narcissism in every wound, right, which is a foundation that we all come through at some point, the base foundation of existing as separate individuals in this world. So there's a lot we're dealing with, but how do we address that issue of the nationalists speak when there's a movement around the world to join globally to address climate change, to address mass species extinction, to address these major threats to human existence, and the existence of civilization itself.
Mm-hmm. Gosh, Megan, thank you so much for that question. All the questioners are doing a marvelous job plugging our book and the table of contents, because each one of these are amazing questions that some of our authors have spoken, written, very much about. And this is right from, maybe you read the book, maybe that's where some of the questions are being spawned. Pardon me?
I have not read the book yet, and I'm really thankful to see it. Thank you.
Yeah, you're very, very welcome. But this is great because it's right from the book. But a number of the authors wrote about that very question of what the heck is going on. There's different levels of the book. Does Trump have narcissism or not? That's sort of a superficial question that has some obvious elements to it. A little bit deeper, what's the Trump phenomenon? Why people are being pulled towards him, which was the last caller's question. And then your question, deeper yet, what the heck is going on globally, nationally and even globally, with narcissism itself? It's epidemic around the globe, certainly around the country. Why are we being pulled in such narcissistic directions? One aspect of which is contemplating electing a possibly narcissistic leader. And there's a number of chapters that try to dive into that. The piece, just to be quick, so I can get back to the presentation, although it's indirectly in it. What I think, and what many of the authors believe, is there's been such a shift over the last 20 years towards self-focused of social media, Twitter, Facebook, the selfie. The selfie, this phenomenon of holding your arm out to take a picture of yourself, which I did yesterday with Chelsea Clinton, who came to Asheville, and we got a selfie with her, which is great, and I kind of like that. But people are going crazy with these selfies. Besides that, I'm not a big selfie guy. But people are obsessed with the self-image. And what's a selfie but at that pool of Narcissus, when Narcissus looks at the reflecting pool, sees his image, and then pines away and dies, falling in love with this image. We are in love with our image. We're taking thousands of selfies a year. We're posting what we have for breakfast on Twitter and Facebook. And we're all about our image on social media. Not so much my generation and probably most of the generation people listening, but the younger, my own children, anybody in the current young generation, very self-focused, and many of us feel that that's a factor, and not the only factor, but narcissism is becoming rampant in the U.S. And the nation in many ways. I'm going to mute the mic, so I apologize that I didn't answer all the questions. I'm going to lower all the hands, but I promise that relatively soon, at the next section break, we will open up the mics. I think what I'll do is any hand that is raised at the next break, I'll just open up all those microphones or invite you, send you an invite to open your microphone. I'm not coming in your living room. And then it'll be an open dialogue, and please just state your name and your question, and we'll talk over each other maybe a little bit, hopefully not too much. But I like the community feel. It's delightful. Thank you very much for all the questions. They've been outstanding. Okay, so back to the presentation. Hide that. Okay. So let's get caught back up. We are now in the second section, which actually somebody mentioned this piece as well, which is narcissism. There has to be some level of narcissism to survive. If we had zero narcissism in ourselves, we would have no confidence, we would collapse, and there's no way we would seek any elected office, and certainly not the presidency. So that gets to section 2, which is healthy presidential narcissism versus unhealthy presidential narcissism. And if you're in the table of contents, this is the Nathan Schwartz-Salant question. He has, this whole chapter isn't on that, but he has this wonderful section within it that really kind of dives into this piece. I'm just going to, of course, touch on the highlights, but he does a great job in highlighting, examining, exploring it in more detail. And this is saying that all of us, but particularly a world leader, somebody who's going for the office of presidency or any high-level office, really has to have some level of narcissism in order to seek such a position as that. You have to have confidence. You have to be sure of yourself. You have to have the arrogance to try to become, president. And Hillary Clinton isn't absent of narcissism. All of us have it. She must have it to some degree. Donald Trump is just a lightning rod that we're saying of narcissism, at least the images we see of him, and that's why he's getting the brunt of the focus right now. And again, these are charismatic, inspiring, motivating, folks, and there's got to be some self-assurance and charisma and narcissism. But narcissism can be life-giving or life-taking. The piece that Nathan was talking about in that chapter is that every so often a very profound, gifted leader comes. All leaders have some level of skills and talents, but every so often you see a profound leader, a Gandhi, a Martin Luther King, a Abraham Lincoln, or a negative, a Benito Mussolini, who can deeply inspire, motivate, engage people because they have this profoundness of them or behind them. And what Nathan talks about in his book is that happens as they open up a window to the transcendent, the archetypal, or even the divine. The Jungians, the ones that know Jungian jargon, will hear the word self-object, a self-object. You can ignore that term if you're not a Jungian, but really all that self-object is talking about is the transcendent, the archetypal world. So a profound leader, a gifted, motivational, inspiring leader is a profound leader because he or she is opening up a window to the transcendent and thus motivating and igniting people's imagination as they see this other world. Now, not consciously, not saying this, probably not even aware that they're doing it, and the person, the follower, doesn't know it either. These are all unconscious, processes, mostly. To some degree, they do so. A leader with healthy presidential narcissism, all leaders have presidential narcissism. If it's healthy presidential narcissism, they reveal the transcendent world without identifying to it. So here's the transcendent, but it's not me. That's not me, but I'm revealing that transcendent to you. And again, that would be Abraham Lincoln, a John F. Kennedy, Mahatma Gandhi. John F. Kennedy asked not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. Beautiful example of showing the transcendent. There's a bigger picture. It's not just about you. It's about the bigger picture. Unhealthy presidential narcissism we're defining as, yes, you ignite the people's imagination by revealing the transcendent, archetypal, divine world, but the leader identifies with it. And when they identify with it, they become inflated, potentially, and even tyrannical. That could be a Richard Nixon, that could be a Joseph Stalin, that could be an Adolf Hitler. Yes, these are all inspiring people. They inspire the masses, but they identify with the transcendent. They become inflated by it, narcissistic by it, and then look out because it's all about them and their rule is about them. This goes a little bit back to the days of the kings and queens of old, where if you were a king, you were the realm and the realm was you. I am the king, I the king, I am the realm is I. And in the fairy tales and myths, if the king was sick, the realm was sick, and the land was unfertile and dry and barren and didn't rain. I am the realm is I. They become identified with it. And that's a dangerous situation because then you have a tyrant in charge. Not all kings. There were some great kings that didn't over-identify with that. So let's take a quick break with that. So go ahead and let me know your thoughts about this element. Go ahead and click the raise your hand button and let me know any thoughts that you have. It doesn't have to be about presidential narcissism, but that's the current kind of topic of question. Any brave souls that want to ask a question or offer a comment on presidential narcissism. And I'm going to start clicking microphones of anybody who has a hand raised. So far, that's Ken. So Ken, I've opened up your microphone. Do you have a question? Ken, can you hear us? And maybe not. Occasionally microphones won't open up or aren't configured. If you have multiple microphones, it'll be configured weird. So I'm sorry we can't hear your microphone. If that changes, just click through some stuff and talk again and we can try. So I'll probably go ahead and move forward because Ken was the only brave soul to ask, unless you have a quick... Oh, there you go, Ken. Yep, we hear you.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Okay. I struggle a little bit with calling, what Abraham Lincoln had, what calling that narcissism. It doesn't really seem to fit your grid of symptoms.
No, not at all. Very different. But go ahead. But yeah, it shouldn't.
Well, yeah. So so saying that's healthy presidential narcissism to me seems a bit misleading. It misses the point.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's a sense of having a strong ego, which you need in order to survive in the world.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But, Lincoln and Gandhi was the antithesis of narcissism in
Right. Yeah, no, I can go there. And I'm going to mute your microphone. I got some feedback on that. I apologize. Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point, Ken. I really appreciate you bringing that up. When the author used that term, Nathan wasn't referring to clinical narcissism or narcissism as defined by us. That use of the term narcissism is on the spectrum of everyone on the planet has some level of narcissism. And if you didn't have some narcissism, you would be so unconfident that it'd be hard to do just routine activities of daily life with that. So it's not narcissistic personality disorder, and it's really not narcissism in the arrogant space. If you want to replace that word with what you just said, ego, healthy ego, it absolutely works just fine. So healthy presidential ego and unhealthy presidential ego. And a healthy leader ego in Gandhi would be a very humble, very non-identified with transcendent, absolutely. So if that term narcissism in that slide trips you up at all, delete it and just type in ego, because we're not talking about clinical narcissism or even negative pathological narcissism. We're talking about a healthy ego with that. I use that term because that's the term the author used in the book. But yeah, that's a wonderful point with that. And there's one more open hand, so that's, I can't read without my glasses. Christine?
I just want, I don't know, I hope this isn't a diversions, but I find myself, it's very interesting what we're all talking about. I find myself wondering about narcissism in these characters in terms of the public persona and the private life. Because some people, as we know better now, I don't have to pick names, but we know that in their private life, in fact, they did behave with what we would be more concerned about the narcissism, the effect in their personal world. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's something we want to consider when we're looking at the presidential.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Boy, that's a wonderful point. And yet again, it goes right to our table of contents. Thank you for the book again, in essence. Yeah, because the chapter from Nancy Swift-Ferlati is directly to that point of in the home narcissism. She writes in a very candid manner of what it's like for her to be married to a very intense narcissist, seemingly, and what that was like for her. And she does this great job of just writing that out. And it also goes back to that first set of slides that I presented of the APA saying we can't diagnose Donald Trump or anyone with narcissistic personality disorder because we don't know the inside. We don't know their home life necessarily. We don't know persona. Because the public persona could be absolutely narcissistic. I am a strong leader. I'm going to make America great. I'm going to do all these great things. And it could be at home that they're a very empathic, calm, gentle, non-envious, etc. And it's hard to picture that because you would assume that that would translate into the public persona. But you're exactly right. The public, it's not fair to diagnose based on the public persona alone. The private interactions, and even more importantly, the internal, inside their mind, perspective is crucial to really say what's going on. But that's a very, very good point. And Elizabeth, I think your microphone is open, if it worked right.
Can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you just fine. Thank you.
Well, I just wanted to add,
Nero to your list of tyrants. I was looking at an art book yesterday about palaces in Rome and in Italy, and part of his palace has been excavated, and the original one was of course much bigger than they found, but it was all old. And if you look at every Trump sign on any building, it's always gold. And
Yes.
that's his notion of what's the most important mineral, I guess.
Right, right. That makes sense. From a narcissistic bend, gold is going to be crucial. It's valuable. It's money. It's brazen. It's out there. It's symbolic. Yeah. So, and I broaden that to not just that one metal, but well, the Trump Towers, the Trump lobbies. Yeah, when you go to the some of these buildings that they've at least been broadcasting images of. You would presume that somebody that had these tendencies, their buildings and their minerals they choose to put on them, and the, how humble or how powerful the decoration is, would absolutely be a pivotal part of that too.
The other thing I'd like to add is around the diagnostic problem. He could easily be seen. We haven't used the word bully very much, but the shadow or the underside of a bully is a terrified child. And
Yes.
My notion about that with him is that his older brother, died of alcoholism and whatever else apparently because the father was so brutal with him. And Donald decided, aha, that is not for me. I am going to do what Daddy wants in spades. And in doing so, he has become an enormous bully, and he's bragging about the people that he did so well with in New Jersey, in Atlantic City, when he
People he didn't pay, that he declared bankruptcy on and was able to pay pennies on the dollar. Right, when somebody brags, on that, or just the primary. My goodness, the primary election process. Talk about bullying, the energy against those other candidates. God help them. Not that I had a whole lot of sympathy, but boy, they got bullied, pretty intensely. And really, that's where a lot of these concerns started, firing for many of us, myself included, when we were watching the primaries and saying, "Wow, look at what this candidate is doing to the other candidates." It was, really, quite striking. Absolutely. Good. Let me mute the phones, and I'm going to lower all the hands. So, but please go in and re-click, raise your hand if you'd like to be included in the next break when it comes, and we will open up as many microphones as we're able to and go from there. And thank you, everybody, for being brave to speak on the phone with me. It's fun to, instead of just reading questions, to speak person to person. I think we get the questions more fully fleshed out when we can talk directly. Okay, so let's get back to the slides for a bit. And so the last part of the talk is focused on why has the unconventional Donald Trump been so wildly successful with that. Not 100%. He clearly drops things in the polls and go down. When you look at his candidacy and the others over the years, despite being clearly the unlikely victor, at least in the beginning, he has had a incredibly successful campaign. And what's going on in our country that may be happening? There's two pieces we're going to look at in this section. One is what I call the Trump complex, and the other is the core messages. If you're following along in the table of contents, the Trump complex is my chapter. Very brief. It's 1,000 words. It's not hard to get through. And then the other chapter is the Thomas Singer, a psychiatrist in San Francisco, did a great job. It's much longer, but boy, he goes into a lot of really good depth with that. So, okay, my chapter. Is there a Trump complex possessing the United States today? I'm going to have to back up a little bit, and I apologize for the jargon and diving in, but there's a Jungian, Carl Jung, concept called complexes. And what I'm going to talk first about is personal complexes, and then we'll talk about national or group or cultural complexes. So there's a complex that I have in my unconscious psyche, but then there's a equally important theory that the entire nation can have a unconscious complex. So personal complexes to begin with. A personal complex is a set of charged feelings clustered around an issue. So there's a trigger, a sore spot in my psyche, unconscious, and there's some hot button charged feelings in that complex stuff. Now, they're unconscious, at least until I go through psychoanalysis and hopefully tap into them. But even then, they're never fully conscious. They're known better to those around us than to ourselves, again, unless we've done a lot of work to uncover them. But if you ask my wife, Megan, who's actually watching it right now, or my mother-in-law, who's watching it right now as well, they know my buttons, they know my personal complexes, and they know how to get me going. Because the people around me see my triggers and my complexes better than I do, because they're unconscious to me. They're usually stemming from trauma, not always, but all of us, through childhood, get beat up, sometimes literally, sometimes emotionally, and we have trauma, and if we've been traumatized enough, very often there'll be a charged set of feelings that will cluster around a certain part of our personality, and that will often then lead to unhealthy behavior. Could be self-destructive behavior, could just be problematic behavior, could be depression, could be anxiety, but those personal complexes tap into problems for us usually. And a lot of us have heard of these complexes. You might have heard of the mother complex, the warrior complex, the hero complex, the inferiority complex, the Peter Pan complex, and really the list is endless because you can always find a better name for a complex that fits yours or somebody you're working with issue. It's really just a shorthand to get you there. But there are some recurrent patterns that we see, like the ones on the screen, the mother complex, the hero complex, etc. And a hero complex would be, if I'm in a hero complex, when I get triggered, I've got to save the day and jump in and rescue. Many physicians have a hero complex. We rush in on our white horses and save the damsel in distress, or whoever. It doesn't have to be a damsel, of course. Peter Pan complex is a puer eterna, or puella. That's a jargon we won't go into. But a Peter Pan, we all know people who will never grow up, that just are always kids. They might be in their 50s, 60s, 70s, but they're still sort of a Peter Pan inside. Stress triggers our complexes, and if we get in an extreme state, we can become possessed by the complex. Possession means that it so overrides a personality that I am trapped in that complex, and all you're seeing for a period of time during possession is that complex. And that can be very damaging. We can quit our jobs, we can have affairs, we can leave, flee the country, or just stay locally in a possessed state. That's a bad situation usually. Now, just as people can have personal unconscious complexes, so can entire nations or other groups. It can be a tribe, a city, a nation, a group, but we can have a national complex. Again, these are unconscious. People aren't aware of them usually until they read our book or somehow grow and become aware of it. And it leads to unusual group behavior, if it's a group complex. And again, they cluster around very charged emotions and are usually related to trauma. So as we were writing that chapter, I was thinking, what could be the trauma be that are triggering the current, what appears like a state of national possession by a Trump complex, what we're going to call the Trump complex. And of course, September 11th, 2001, the Twin Towers, huge national boom. When we were attacked in the Pentagon, Pennsylvania, and New York City, that was a trauma that every one of us that was alive and aware and watching TV at that point, all of us went through a trauma. If you lived in New York or Washington, D.C., even more so. Then, of course, 15 years of war, nonstop war, 15 years of nonstop terrorism. Of course, terrorism goes back farther, but boy, the Taliban and then Al-Qaeda, now ISIS, we're all living, not all, but there's a state of fear from that. And then, of course, the 2008 financial collapse, huge trauma, financially, personally, losing jobs. The nation kind of went through a large trauma. and the perceived loss of national dominance. The United States being the dominant player on the world stage, there's at least a perception that that's been in demise for many years, and that's a national wound as well. Now, you can go back to 2001, or you can go back 50 years to Vietnam. Really, since the 1950s, where we were on the high from the post-World War II, and America seemed in charge of the planet, since that time, and Vietnam in particular, there's been a steady perceived decline and trauma that the United States has been going through. So feelings of powerlessness on the international stage, the foreign wars, the terrorism, loss financially of the American dream through the 2008 collapse, and this unconscious national fear and longing. So a Trump complex, you don't have to call it the Trump complex, it can be called really anything, but I'm calling it that because it appears that Donald Trump has tapped into that and has energized a huge number of followers unconsciously through the nation. The Trump complex draws the nation towards an image of strength and nostalgia, we're saying. Strength, this near Herculean ability to build walls, the best walls in the world, to keep out all the bad guys, to always win, to know who the terrorists are and to kick them out of the country, to just know you're going to restore law and order no matter what because you're a strong guy, can do it. And a nostalgia back to the good old days, the 1950s, almost a Camelot space where we were in charge, America was first, political correctness didn't exist nearly, we all knew who was in charge, and America was great back then. So make America great again. So strength and nostalgia are the core energies of the Trump complex that is bringing millions and millions of people unconsciously towards a perceived solution. There's a perception unconsciously that will heal the wounds in essence. At the core of every complex is an archetype. That's a Jungian term. We don't need to go too deeply into that. But then as we thought through, well, that's a Trump complex, what's the archetypal core of that? And we talked very briefly in the chapter, but we acknowledged, at least for me, when I thought through what embodies that strength and nostalgia, to me, it was John Wayne. When I look at the John Wayne movies, John was strong, he was rugged. Now this is the character of John Wayne. I don't know about John Wayne personally, but the character that he portrayed in the movies was one of strength, ruggedness, never backed down from a fight, always said exactly what he thought. He always knew who the bad guy was, and he never hesitated to pull the trigger and got rid of that bad guy. The other person I thought of, who kind of embodied that as well, is General Patton, and this is a screenshot of that famous scene that he's in front of the flag and he's going to kick the butts of the enemy. And he, of course, embodies all those characteristics we just saw on the last slide. And so there's a energy from Donald Trump embodying this archetypal flow unconsciously, and people are really, I think, being just pulled towards that. So I'm going to open up the microphone in just a minute, but before, maybe even while we're doing that, I'm going to invite a poll question. Give me a minute to click down there. Okay, there it is. Launch. Okay. So what I think you're saying is when I look at Donald Trump, his behavior, the image that resonates with me are one of these. It doesn't have to be. If there are other, please do. And with the ones that are clicking other, which is 36% so far, if you care to raise your hand and share with me verbally kind of who the other kind of is with that. Hopefully I didn't just lower everybody's hand. I clicked a button that might have lowered some hands. Oh, shoot, it did. If you don't mind, raise your hand again if I just lowered your hand. Didn't mean to do that. So go ahead and raise your hand if you have a question, and raise your hand if you want to tell me what your other image is for Mr. Trump. Okay, there's some hands raised. I am opening some microphones. If your hand is raised, your microphone is now open. There's not feedback with that. If anybody wants to speak, tell me your first name and your thought.
My name is Mike, and my other archetype would be Adolf Hitler.
Adolf Hitler, okay. You're going right for the juggler with that one. Okay, I can see why you would say that. That's clearly controversial. But yeah, that's not.
And it may give away complex.
I'm sorry, say again?
That may give away a personal complex of mine.
Right. That's a wonderful point that as we talk about this material, our own personal complexes are absolutely activated. And if you're having a strong emotion, any of you out there in computer land, you may well be in a bit of a complex right now. I probably am as well. But good, thank you. Other thoughts or questions?
Hitler would be good, but I think just as good would be dictator de jure.
Dictator de jure? Mm-hmm. Okay. Yep.
I like that.
Can I speak?
Yeah, go ahead. We're hearing you. Mm-hmm.
Yes. I think we should go to something more closer to the political field, like Ronald Reagan. I think that he really represented very constructive things too, but also in a certain way, certain aspects of the American soul that are similar to what people see in Trump, that is making America great again, this way of facilitating the best, the richest, the one that really make the money for America, and similar way of thinking. I think is closer to the reality.
Mm-hmm. That's a good question. That would be an example of a archetype that's less pejorative. Yeah, I guess John Wayne is not pejorative, but those Trump followers that are being pulled towards Trump, and if you want to be a little more balanced than we've probably been today, Ronald Reagan might not be a bad example of that. If Ronald Reagan was an actor, was on TV, movies, and had this strength and nostalgia energy. So absolutely, yeah, I can see why somebody would say that. Yeah, thank you.
What comes to me is a sort of more two-dimensional archetypal figure from the Popeye cartoons, and it's that dual figure of Popeye and Brutus.
Yep, Popeye. Yeah, I can see that absolutely. Which one would be Trump? Yeah, in the cartoon.
I guess it depends on your perspective. I think a lot would see Brutus, and I guess some people see Popeye.
Yeah, that's a good point. There's a polarity with that, Popeye and Brutus. We could write a chapter on that. That's a great archetypal image. Popeye being the savior, hero, saves olive oil, and goes, saves the day with it. Brutus being the bully, the negative, the dark. And of course, you could argue that there may be some back and forth. If it's not crystal clear that Trump is all Brutus or is all Popeye, but us Jungians will say there's a transcendent third, a way to transcend that they might be in. But yeah, absolutely, I could see that. Other folks?
I find that really interesting, and I think because I'm in Canada, it's easier for me than picking other Americans.
Yes, absolutely. Being outside the country absolutely helps in trying to get a perspective. We're in the soup here, and we're swimming in it every day. Good. Anybody else? Okay, going once. I appreciate whoever's dog was barking, so we had a dog weighing in with that too. Yeah, I don't know if that was a Trump supporter dog or a Clinton, but it's fun to hear the other energies. I guess the primitive animalistic side, we can call that. Okay, so let me make sure I've closed the poll. So hopefully you're seeing my slides. If at any point you're not seeing the slides and it's stuck on a poll question, raise your hand and I'll try to take action on that. Okay, so we did that. So this is the last point before we're going to have just some open-ended dialogue and I guess some concluding thoughts I have of where to go from here, how to kind of help in moving forward. And let me check time. We're 70 minutes into it. I can go at least 90 minutes if people need. We might even go almost towards 2 hours. Anybody who needs to sign off, of course, feel free. But we'll have another 10 minutes of slides, and then we'll be shifting to the final questions. Okay. The Trump campaign uses masterfully crafted core messages that tap into unconscious fears and unspoken thoughts. This is Dr. Thomas Singer, psychiatrist out of San Francisco, in his chapter, and I wanted to highlight some pieces within that. Dr. Singer identifies at least 4 core messages that we hear out of the Trump side, which are get them out of here, make America great again, I want my country back, and America first. And each one of these questions is tapping into a deep, hidden, unconscious or conscious, but a hidden fear or thought, sometimes hidden because they're politically incorrect and we're not supposed to say things that we really want to say. But Trump says them for us, and that's okay. Or it's a fear, maybe even an unconscious one. So the first one, get them out of here, is actually a recording. You can probably Google that on YouTube and hear him saying that on occasions, which first arose with the dissenters, the people at the rally that were activists that were trying to disrupt the rally. And Trump would say, get them out of here, and the Secret Service or whoever would get them out of there. But that phrase is, of course, equally identified with any scapegoated group of people or individual with that. You could, I guess, say the other candidates in the primary campaign. But more scary are the people that hold perhaps Donald Trump's shadow, for him, Muslims, immigrants, Mexicans. For a while he was saying we would ban all Muslims from entering the country, get them out of here. We would build a wall and keep them, those bad Mexicans who are rapists and killers and whatever, not true, of course, but some are, but the majority aren't. But we'll keep those bad people out. We'll keep all immigrants out if there's any concerns on them. And there's this sense of keeping the other out. That resonates, unfortunately, with a lot of people who are scared of the other, who project their shadow on the other in a scapegoated way, and kind of hear, oh, here's somebody who's speaking it like it is, who's finally talking about this deep problem in our country. Of course, Make America Great Again, which is a slogan. It's on his baseball caps. You can buy the baseball caps online if you'd like. It's so important, a core slogan, that he says it whenever he can and has it on caps, which is restoring America's preeminence in business, power, wealth, military domination. In my mind, those are the sorts of things that he seems to be saying as he's saying Make America Great Again. Some of that is okay, some of that is politically incorrect, but it's again that fear that people have that has lost dominance. We've lost control, we've lost power. Or I personally am a laid off automobile worker and I got no power, and we need to make America great again and fire up the assembly line or whatever it is with that, tapping into a deep fear. I want my country back. That was a quote from a lady at a Trump rally that Tom Singer talks about. I'm not sure if Donald Trump has used those exact words, but the campaign energy, the core message from the campaign resonates with that, which is, I want my country back again. Get out those bad people out of our country. Let's make America great. Let's have it like it was in the 1950s or 60s. And of course, this has the feel of those bad people have taken my country away from me and I want it back. And who are those bad people? They're the liberals, the minorities, the transgenders, the lesbian gays, the politically correct bad doers. Whoever we are targeting as an undesirable, those people have corrupted our country and made it politically correct and diverse and things that some people may not want. And so they're tapping into that energy. And then America First. America First, which sounds kind of nice, probably not to the lady in Canada, who is probably offended by that, as you ought to be, because while it sounds nice to have America First, well, that means everybody else is second. And how does that make sense, that America is first and you all are second, third, fifth, and 190th? There's a arrogance, there's a narcissism, with that of America First. If you were really saying, no, we just want to take care of our things and make it fair and have reasonable trade deals, yes, okay, but that's not really what most people hear kind of with that. So the Trump campaign's core messages are constant attacks on political correctness. He is very politically incorrect, and doing so gets him more and more votes. He says it like it is, supposedly. And these are tapping into these unspoken thoughts, deep fears, things that people don't think they can say because they'll get blasted for it, but they are thinking maybe in their hearts, or again, they're even unconscious. And that's one of the other reasons why we're hypothesizing that the Trump campaign has been so successful beyond what we anticipated. There's a Trump complex moving them towards a John Wayne archetype of strength and nostalgia. And there's this core messages that Trump is tapping into very, very effectively with that. So let's open up some microphones. We'll talk. If anybody has any thoughts about that, raise your hand, hit that button. And again, the overview slide is what we've spoken about so far. Actually, let me put the other slide up so you can be thinking about what you can do, and we'll talk about this in just a moment. So let me open up microphones if I can take a moment to click there. Okay, good. Lots of microphones. I'm going to open up every microphone that has a hand raised. Unless we get feedback, then we'll go one by one. So go ahead and tell me your name and a thought or question. And sorry, two of them I can't open. You might have them blocked on your end. I'm going to try to do so. Okay, go ahead. Anybody that'd like to speak? Should be about 10 with open microphones. Anybody?
This is Mike once again. Can you hear me?
Yes, hear you loud and clear. Thank you, Mike.
The question you asked earlier, how has Donald Trump been so successful? I personally changed that to how has Donald Trump got what he wanted. The word successful to me suggests something good has happened. Again, it's my complex, I'm sure, but I'd like to repeat that.
Right. I can absolutely resonate with, right, how are we defining success? Yeah, that goes back to the bully comment made earlier of bullying seemingly and getting what he wants. Clearly got the primary and obviously wants the presidency, at least many people think. Yeah, thank you very much, Mike. Who else?
This is Megan again.
Okay.
I would love to understand what it is that Donald narcissisms or other narcissists, we're going to label them that, need. What does the child require that the child did not get, and what is being fed? How is the narcissism being fed by all of the hate and all that's coming down on him? Because then it seems like there's this fluffing up. There's this enlargement of that says, no, I'm a good person and this is how good I am. And so it just creates, it just like balloons what is eating away at him.
Boy, you keep going through our table of contents, and thank you again for that. I won't flip to it, but on the table of contents, Dr. Len Cruz writes a great chapter on, well, Rumpelstiltskin, which is really cute. He takes Rumpelstiltskin and uses the metaphorical fairy tale with Rumpelstiltskin in part of it, but the other part he talks about is exactly what you mentioned. He really gives a nice review of narcissism overall, and that exact aspect of what part of narcissism is from the wounded child within. And most theorists with narcissism will look at wounds of the person that has the struggle with it, and the deeper and earlier the wound, the stronger the sense of fragility. Okay, I'm not a good person, and there's a compensatory narcissism that comes up. But most people think that if you pierce the bubble of the narcissist, if you really get to the interior, there's a very fragile little boy or little girl in there that is terrified. And the narcissistic shell is a defense to keep them intact, but there's really usually a small child inside. And Dr. Cruz's chapter really goes through. He has a roadmap for that, and he looks at what stage of development the child received the wound, and actually correlates it then with what type of narcissism you might expect that to come to. But it really speaks directly to that point you raised. Thank you very much.
It's Christine Canidas again from Toronto. I really like Megan's question, and that sounds like a great chapter you're just describing, Dr. Cruz, because I do find myself, I know that at some point in his writings, Jung said that it's very banal to keep pointing out that someone has a complex, and that the question is, what are you going to do with it? So I do feel that that's one of the things, what can Trump do, or how can we respond to that, or to anyone who may have this narcissistic wound? But how do we go? Where do we go from here? Like, what do we as Jungians say now? What do you do with this complex?
Mm-hmm. Right, which is the slide that's up there, although that's more what do you do to get this word out, what do you do about the election. What you're saying is, I think, is what do you do with narcissism, and of course there's all kinds of levels of that. What do I do with my own narcissism, which is probably the most important. What do I do with a person I'm working with and their narcissism, if I'm a therapist or even just a friend or family. What do I do about the national narcissism that we experience, and what do I do about the global narcissism that's out there. The most important is really about my own narcissism. As much as I love scapegoating Donald Trump or Benito Mussolini or Adolf Hitler or Bluebeard or Trumpelstiltskin, whoever it is, that's great, but what's my role in that? And the James Hollis chapter, another chapter to plug, James Hollis, wonderful author. Boy, he does a marvelous job. He uses notes from the underground and really dives into where am I in that, and how is the narcissism speaking to me, and what I need to look at, what I need to reflect at. So yeah, how do we heal the nation? How do we heal ourselves? How do we heal our communities? Step one, I think, is November 8th. We've got a little more than a month to hopefully raise this issue and elect the right president. But beyond that, over the next decades, what do we do with this narcissism? Do you have any thoughts about that? Anything that comes to your mind about that?
I think I don't think I could be articulate enough on our discussion, but I find and I really look forward to reading Hollis's chapter. I think he's excellent.
Mm-hmm. He is really good. I love Jim. He's a neat guy. Other questions? Yeah, I want to talk a little bit of what to do, and then we'll open up for a final round of questions. But any others with microphones open that want to say anything before we shift to tab?
Steve, this is Louise Lumen in Maryland. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm. Yours, and mute your microphone so we can hear your keystrokes as you're typing. But go ahead, last question.
Yeah, this is Louise Lumen in Maryland, one of your new authors.
Yes, Louise. Hello. Very good to hear
hi.
from you.
So
Yes.
glad you're doing this. I just had a point of how much Trump contradicts himself and changes his position based on the weather or whatever. And the thing that really characterizes it for me is when he once said, I heard him say, "I will be so presidential you won't even recognize me." When people were saying, he was so scattered. And I thought, well, if I ever, and I never have, if I ever was somebody who wanted to vote for him, I would go the opposite direction. I'm thinking, who is this man? What can we ever trust in him?
Mm-hmm.
Going to change his stripes, he says.
The statements are outlandish, absolutely outlandish. We had a hard time narrowing it down to the 10 that we published in the book. But yes, these statements of I will do this, I will be winning, we'll win so much in America, you'll be sick of winning, we'll be winners, and it'll be great, and you'll love it. And, well, those statements don't mean anything. I mean, how are we going to win? How are we going to love it? Why will we like it? What will you do? But they're these...
I'm a whole different person, from what you see now. I'll be so presidential, you won't even recognize me.
Right. Well, good. Why don't you do that now before you're elected so we can really see it? But it gives you the chameleon effect of folks with sociopathic personality disorder, antisocial, which I'm not diagnosing with either. But there have been some folks that have said Trump's a sociopath. And what some of them might be connecting to when they're making that allegation is a sociopath, someone with antisocial personality disorder, is marvelous at being a chameleon. Anything you want me to be, I'll be it for you for the next few minutes or a few days or weeks. But if I'm somewhere else, I'll be the other thing that you want me to be. So, yeah, that's a disturbing part of his temperament, at least to me, to see that chameleon effect. Yeah. Yes. Well, thank you, Louise. I'm going to mute microphones, and I'm going to put all the hands down. So get ready to raise your hand again. We'll have one more round of questions or comments, or even just an open-ended discussion. If we want to end this with a full discussion, I think that would be fine. Just to open as many microphones as want to be open, and we can do some stuff. Okay, so this slide, this is what can I do? Of course, vote. Well, living in Canada, it's probably not legal for you to vote, but vote, I guess, for your people. But if you're a U.S. citizen and have the right to vote, vote. Work on the campaign. Do what you can. If you really think Trump's the correct guy, well, vote for him. But many of you, I'm sure, are thinking Clinton, has a better temperament. And so vote and get out there and work to make sure the correct election result is for whatever you believe in. We would love it if you spread the word of this seminar and this book for us. If you disagree with what I've said, then don't spread it. But if you resonate with what we're saying today, send the link to this webinar. This is free. We're not charging anything for this webinar. We see it as a public service. Get it out there. Within a few days, Ryan Deegan will email all of you a link to the YouTube, free YouTube video. Please share this with anybody that you think would benefit from it, and ask them to share it with their people. I would love this video to go viral. I would love people to be learning about Jungian principles of narcissism and elections. Read our book. Buy it. We're in a lot of debt with this book. It would be helpful to get our expenses out of this book. But buy the book, share the book, read the book. I think it goes well into these topics in a very depth way. Our website is trumpnarcissism.com. Go to the website, share the website. There's a media kit. You can download the press kit. If you know anybody in the media corps, newspaper, radio, television, doesn't matter, please call them up, email them, send them an attachment with our press kit, and see if they would do a story on this. We really want to spread the word with this. Then Facebook. I know you're all on Facebook. Most of you are. Trump Narcissism is the Facebook page. So click on the Facebook page, like it, and then click the like button. You don't need to like the page, although I'd like you to. And comment. Just do one comment a week. Something that we post or somebody else posts. Just write your comment on it. Of course, when you comment, it spreads it to others who comment and spread it to others yet. And my final poll question, which is a little bit self-serving, so I'm going to ask your indulgence, with it. But it goes to that. We will launch the poll. And so the poll doesn't show up on my screen, but I think what it's saying is taking action right now. So what action can you do right now? For those of you that didn't have to leave your lunch hour and have a moment and are still on, what you can do, you can take out your smartphone. I know each one of you have it. It's in your pocket. It's in your bag. It's on your desk. Pick it up. Go to your Facebook app or your Facebook page and like our Trump Narcissism piece. And the poll question is, have you clicked on the like button there, or are you willing to do it later? I think that's okay. And I'll give you a moment to vote. The number of you are voting. Got a good percentage. And I'll wait till that levels off. And go ahead and start clicking the raise your hand button, by the way. Oh, and people, my Facebook thing is lighting up. Well, there you go. So you must be doing something. Go ahead and, click the raise your hand button. And as soon as I close the poll, we'll open up the microphones in just a moment. Okay, poll is closed. And I'm going to share it. So 80-20. 80% of you did, 20% didn't. Maybe you don't have Facebook. Maybe you're mad at me for asking you to do something. Either way is fine, and I respect both pieces. So click your button. I'm going to open up microphones. If there's not too much feedback, we'll keep them all open. If there's some feedback, I'll have to close them down a little bit. Let me hide the poll. I'll leave it on, I guess, this one. And let me open up the microphones. Give me a moment to do that. Okay, so any hand that is raised, I should be opening your microphone right now. The telephone ones sometimes open up, sometimes don't. Okay, so anybody whose microphone is open, feel free to say your name.
Colette Perkins.
Oh, yeah, a little bit of feedback. Go ahead. Who is that?
Yeah, let me turn my
Your speaker down will help.
That's a problem. Okay. Am I clearer now?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, great. So anyway, there's a couple of things. I had my hand raised a couple of times, so if you don't mind. We've been asked a question about what does Trump represent. As an African-American woman, he represents a racist man. Racism. That's what I see when I see him. The other part of it that I wanted to make a comment on was when we talked about this collectiveness, this idea, this society, and the narcissistic wounds. I think that Trump speaks to those. I think that he speaks to those who have white privilege, and I think that those who think they have privilege but really don't, and those are the poor whites. And I think he speaks to them that this is the time for us to raise up. Because when you begin to start talking about the idea of making America great again, there's a whole bunch of us who have not thought that America has been too kind and great to them. So so the idea of talking about that really doesn't make sense, especially for people of color. The other thing that I think Trump is doing, not Trump, but I'm just in terms of just kind of opening up some wounds, is that I saw a video the other day of a white guy with Black Lives Matters, and then also he went into a white community, and then he went into a black community with All Lives Matters, and I just thought it was interesting when we talked about narcissistic wounds. That is interesting that both of those signs, All Lives Matters in the black community, he got accosted, and Black Lives Matters in the white community, he got accosted. So I think that this whole idea about folks, minorities having narcissistic wounds, and that people who are feeling, who are white, who are disenfranchised and having narcissistic wounds, I think all of this has been brought up, and I think that we have to kind of address what really people are feeling inside and what is coming up and out. And those are my comments, and I think that I could do something about it in terms of not being somewhere between Black Lives Matters and All Life Matters, and being able to hold those two spaces and be able still to function. I think that is what I could do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, tell me your name one more time.
It's Colette Perkins, and I'm from California, and I am an MFT intern.
Yeah, thank you so much, Colette. Those are marvelous points, and I completely agree with that. The minority, the attack on minorities, at least the feeling that I get when got this intense energy from Trump, the minorities in our country must or may just be feeling terrified by that, because there's this seemingly scapegoating approach that is just absolutely terrifying. And I agree, the Make America Great Again, back to the 1950s, at least that's the image that I get that he's trying to pull us back to, wasn't so great for a lot of people, and for women and minorities was not great at all. If you're a white man, privileged, it was wonderful. These were perfect. You were on top of the world. And it does. I agree that when I see Make America Great, I've got this feeling of he's trying to bring me back to the 50s, and that just, yeah. It's scary.
And if I could just say something about what you just said about in terms of being a person of color and seeing this, I think what happens is that it's interesting that the things that he is saying and the things that we're seeing, they've always been done. As an African-American woman, they've always been done. So the idea that, for me, that having that part of me being so shown to everybody. So the idea of me experience racism on a one-on-one basis, but the idea of it being televised is also creating, I think, the sense of shame. I'm wondering whether or not in terms of African Americans, I wonder whether or not if seeing yourself reflected in such an inferior position and seeing everybody seeing it, and what the shame and how that wound that we have in with ourselves and how it's being televised. And I think that people of color may not know what to do with that energy, because we know it. The idea that people were being shot, black men are being shot in the community, that's nothing new. It's just that now it's on Facebook, but we've always known it. So it's just kind of interesting. I'll go ahead and mute my mic.
Thank you so much for that. Marvelous points. What else? Anybody have a response to that, or any other comments, with today's talk? About 10 microphones open. Anybody have any thoughts about these various pieces?
This is Ken from Kansas City.
Hi, Ken.
Hey. I was talking with a friend of mine the other day who's a Unitarian minister, and she was talking about Germany in the middle of the rise of Hitler, and it's very easy to put a lot of this on Trump, but I think that a more important focus is on America and on ourselves, as you did bring up. But there's a reason that Trump has been able to come to such power, and it's tapping into the mindset of many Americans. And an interesting comparison is the American people today and the German people in the 30s.
Absolutely.
Where they, a lot of them were, well, Hitler's kind of a crazy guy, but how bad can it be? How bad can it get?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me read a little quote from the book. Again, you're going right from our table of contents. But Tom Lavin, if I can quickly find the chapter, wrote just a paragraph. I'm just going to read to you that taps.
I have not read the book yet.
That on page 105. Okay, I have your book. But yeah, here, okay. Yeah, let me just read this real quick because it's exactly what you're talking about. This is right from Tom Lavin. Once upon a time in the 1930s, there was a very sad and depressed country. The people were very angry and frustrated because they knew they had been misled. They realized that some people in the military had been sent to countries in which they did not belong, and some of them had died there. They realized that new borders were proposed, felt lost, and did not feel they belonged anymore. They no longer felt that they were a part of something bigger. They realized their pride and their trust were gone. Then came a man out of nowhere. He had never served in elected office. He said he would make the country great again. Huge crowds came to hear him speak of renewed greatness. He promised to employ the unemployed. He promised to build new roads and repair roads that were impassable. People who did not belong were to be expelled, and the walls would be erected to keep undesirables out of the country, striving so hard to be great once again. The man's name was Adolf Hitler, nicknamed Der Führer. That's page 106. But Tom Lavin, how chilling. When I read that, I thought, oh, that's got to be in the book, because that speaks so powerfully, I think, to your comment there. I'm not saying he is Hitler. I'm not saying he's going to do a Holocaust. But if you look at the energy in 1930s Germany, and some, not all, but some of the energy now, people see parallels and are scared from that.
Yeah, and I think that we need to put more focus on the American people and the circumstances that have led to Trump's rise in power, and because that brings us back, that brings it back onto ourselves, rather than this standoffish, well, that's Trump, what are we going to do about Trump, what happens if he becomes president?
Yeah, exactly, and right. So important to focus.
That's ignoring our complicity in the whole matter, and which I think is the bigger energy there. So to bring that focus back onto ourselves and what in me has allowed this to happen.
Yeah. Going back to our complicity, our narcissism, how have I been a part of this fabric of society that's allowed this to happen? Like not doing all that is, absolutely crucial. And many of the authors, exactly that. Yeah, how has probably the most directly, but many of them do. Yeah, thank you so much. Other questions, comments? Got a few more microphones open, I think. Anybody want to add anything more before we wind down?
Yeah, this is Jane. Jane, can
Hello?
you hear me?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Hi. You can
Yep,
hear
go ahead. Yep, we can hear you well, Jane. Thank you.
Thank you. This is Jane in Issaquah, Washington. And I'm not a Jungian analyst, but I'm a psychotherapist 35 years. And one of the questions that has been on my mind for a long time is, should Donald Trump lose this election, how do we as therapists and as a collective population begin to address these disenfranchised followers who lost their leader? There's a lot of hatred. There's a lot of anger, and I would like to hear people's thoughts on, as therapists, whatever your intention, what do we do that will be helpful?
Well, let's lead it with you, Jane. Do you have a thought about that before we ask other listeners about how to do so? That's a wonderful question of, should Clinton win, the angry, or not angry, but the Trump supporters that have followed this energy, how do we speak to them? Do you have a thought, Jane, on that?
I wish I did. I've been contemplating it for some time. I'm really concerned about the hatred, the reemergence of the racial issues, seeing images of the Ku Klux Klan, the wall, keep Muslims out. They're all different from us. There's got to be a healing on a community level. In my office, I don't know exactly how I'll handle it, but I'm more concerned as a human being in the society. How will I deal effectively with this hatred? And I don't really have a good suggestion except working on a community level to bring people together.
Building bridges, community building. And of course, the other comment of the inside of, take the speck out of your own eye before you get the log out of someone else's eye. How can I deal with the narcissist within me? As we then move forward. Awareness, absolutely, trying to spread the word, awareness of this issue. Again, the one aspect of this, we wrote a op-ed piece in the Asheville Times about a week ago, and the headline was something along the lines of, "Thank you, Mr. Trump." And we got a lot of flack for that. Some of my friends read the headline but not the article, which made me mad. They were saying, "Steve, are you pro-Trump? You didn't read the article." Because the article was, "Thank you, Mr. Trump, for bringing up the issue of narcissism, of collective unconscious, of these issues in such a profound way. We wouldn't be speaking about narcissism were not for Trump." And I'm not saying that it's marvelous that it came onto the scene, but there is some blessing in that of it's making us think, and we're talking right now about it, and we're raising the issues. So there could be some healing from these divisive elements that come. But other listeners, there's some open microphones. Raise your hand if I've missed your microphone. Anybody want to add anything to that or new thoughts?
May I respond? It's Christine from Toronto.
Yeah, absolutely. Please do, Christine.
I thought that last question was so good, and I also want to, just two quick things. I really appreciate, I think it was Colette Perkins, raising this point about how she's holding the tension between the opposites. And I think in responding to Jane, this interplay of opposites, it is so key to what we learn and try to do in our work as Jungians, with ourselves and with clients. And so I really want to say how much I appreciate those two comments and many others. The second point I wanted to make is a bit following on what you just said, Stephen. I was struck when I watched the Democratic National Convention and I heard Michelle Obama and many people speaking. And I was really thrilled, and I felt that to a certain extent what Trump triggered, and to some extent Sanders also, he pushed them higher. As Michelle Obama said, they go low, we go high. And that is an aspect that you hope does happen with the interplay of opposites, that you have this, you have one come up and it pushes the others to respond in ways that we maybe have not, we could do with that kind of development.
Absolutely. This could end up being a really good thing that happened in the last year or two. Of course, it could be catastrophic in other ways, but yeah, that tension of opposites, yeah, this may be causing a reaction the other way. There's, of course, the pendulum swing of, yeah, President Bush, yeah, President Obama, yeah, and now possibility of Trump. You really feel this wide swing back and forth that hopefully we can get it more, yeah, in the middle. But these could be reactionary forces to what's, preceded, these elements.
Well, what I heard Colette saying was really, you don't want to always be caught in the swinging pendulum, and this idea of how do we hold the tension? How
Yes.
can you hold on? And I think that's probably what,
Right. You try to get to a transcendent third. You hold the opposites and you try to transcend to something totally new. That isn't 50-50 balance of the two or a pendulum swing, but something wholly new yet honors both of the polarities with that.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree that'd be the goal. I don't know how to get to that goal, but that's what we hope for with that.
Mm-hmm.
Good. Other
Thank you
thoughts?
so much.
This is my one with the complex about Adolf Hitler. And I personally need to avoid gloating if that happens. Some empathy. I know that's for me. I hope that's life for others there.
Absolutely. Right. Should Clinton win, if that side goes into a gloating space, that's not going to help healing at all. The quote I love from Obama, I don't know if you all remember, and probably other presidents have said this too, but he was in Chicago the night of the victory. His family was there. He said something like, I know almost half of you didn't vote for me tonight. You voted for my opponent. But I need to tell you that I am all of your president now, or will be in January, and I'm going to fight as hard for you as for the half that voted for me. And that's such a marvelous statement with that. It's hard to imagine Trump saying that. Maybe he would if we're to win. But that's a great, that wasn't President Obama gloating. Yeah, that was him really in this healing energy. And I would hope that whoever wins, that there'll be a healing and not a gloating energy.
This is Megan again.
Hi, Megan.
Hi. So my thought is compassion before the election, to express, especially professionals. I'm not a psychotherapist, but certainly as a professional, and I'll say out loud here, I voted, on the first poll, I offered, I'm not in a position to diagnose him or anyone else, not even my partner, nor would I label, I think labels themselves can be a slippery slope to manifesting that which is being called out by spirit or, some larger healing process. So my sense, now and after the election is to show compassion in that if I'm following, if I put myself in the position of someone who's following Trump and feels seen for the first time in my life and by someone in that position, and I hear other people putting him down, I'm going to raise up so large and say, nope. And so the more anyone can point to not Trump as an individual and not it's his disease and da-da-da-da-da, but to look at, as you have in the book, as the book does and as this conversation is, looking at narcissism as a whole and how do we heal this together? How do we lift up the disenfranchised together? The Democratic Party, in my experience of, if I'm looking at Republican and Democrat, I've been helped in my own life individually by a more Republican bent than I have a Democrat bent. Democrats tend to say go to social services, whereas a Republican, in my experience, will say here's food, here's shelter, how can I help you? So there's a very different mentality there that we're dealing with. A family kind of all teaming together versus, I don't know, go find this help, it's established for you. I'm going to do my own thing type things.
Yeah,
That's my feeling.
Yeah, excellent thoughts. I very much appreciate that. We've got a few minutes left. I've got a client coming at 2 p.m. Eastern, so I need to take a deep breath in a moment. So, but maybe a few more minutes if anybody else wants to say anything further today.
Can I speak?
Yes, please do. Yep, absolutely.
This is another Jean. This is Jean in Baltimore.
Okay.
I just wanted to first respond to the person, to Megan, who just spoke, that where I live, it's the Democrats who are providing the food and not just telling you to go to social services. We've got food pantries on every block in this heavily Democratic city, and churches are packed with Democrats who are feeding people. So let's try to not stereotype. But I think that there are regional differences here that we have to take into account. But my main interest is this, and I really appreciate the emphasis on holding the opposites. I can go back, I'm in my 70s, so I can look back to growing up in a very racist country with a father from East Texas who had this deep racist feelings, and realizing the woundedness that was behind all of that. So what strikes me now is, yes, we must hold the opposites, and we must hold empathy. And I feel as a therapist that the moment we're in is like where the unconscious has finally entered the room. We've lived all these generations about, thinking of Americans as such developed, conscious people, and the unconscious has just come in and sat down, and it's the 300-pound gorilla. We have to face the fact that we are not more conscious than other people. We are not better than other countries. We have a lot of motives and a lot of unprocessed stuff, and now it's right out in front of us where we can deal with it. Mm-hmm. So as horrible as it is, maybe it's a starting point.
It could be. Yeah.
Beginning to process this whole complex of American exceptionalism,
mm-hmm.
which is so pathological.
It gives us an opportunity to hopefully work on this, grow, and evolve, and get into that transcendent third. Absolutely. Thank you so much. Other thoughts?
Thank you. And just thank you for calling me in with that comment. I appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. All right. Most people are trying to sign off because we're at that time. Any last person with an open microphone that wants to say anything before we close?
This is Ken. I just wanted to echo what that last person said. Again, my friend who's a Unitarian minister, we were having a discussion, and she's of course very much into social activism, and I think what is happening now is we are bringing stuff out of the unconscious. Mm-hmm. And that's the first step in the healing. We're just, everyday people are trying to figure out what's going on, and I think that is maybe a small step at this point, but there is, for me, a little bit of hope in that, in seeing discussions like this, where we're coming to realize things that we hadn't thought before.
Yeah, exactly. Very well said. Well, thank you, everybody, today. I'm going to mute the microphones and say. And in the meantime, though, whatever you do to spread the word of what we're trying to accomplish with this, please share this video. This will be a free video. It should be available within a few days on YouTube. We'll send everybody the link to it. Anyone that you feel would benefit from listening to this, we would love to have this spread as much as possible with that. So with that, we will say goodbye, and I will see many of you in 2 or 3 weeks. And thank you again for all the comments. We had a great time with the microphones being on today. Really appreciate that. So bye-bye. Nice being with you. Wow.